Hello again, welcome to the Ref Show. The two top Premier League referees flying England's flag in Europe. And are our assistant referees flagging or not, as the case may be? Questions for Keith Hackett and for David Hirst, who join us this week. I think largely it's been a pretty decent weekend for our referees before we talk Clattenburg and we talk Atkinson, Keith.
Yeah, I think looking at some of the referees, they're looking a little bit more relaxed. It's coming to the end of the season. There's probably less pressure, other than those big games now surrounding relegation. And we'll see over the next couple of weeks how those pan out, because I think that there are some clubs there that the supporters are quite nervous about.
Indeed, some very big games to come. And in Europe as well, where we have Mark Clattenburg, and we can breeze through Stoke 3, Spurs 0, his game in the Premier League, because as usual I didn't put a note against it, which tells you he refereed it very well.
Yeah, I mean, he's just outstanding, isn't he? He's an outstanding referee. He's had a terrific season. And I think the reward of a second leg semi-final might just be the stepping stone towards, say, the final of the Europa Cup. Who knows? Let's hope that he has a good game. I understand Kalina will be watching him as the referee observer. That's positive. And, you know, not glossing over the fact that Martin Atkinson earlier in the week also had a terrific game. Really nailed a top-class performance.
Well, Clattenburg goes on to referee Bayern Munich versus Barcelona under the eagle eye of the UEFA referees chief. And as you say, Martin Atkinson refereed Juventus 2, Real Madrid 1. Before we come on to the significance of Clattenburg's showcase here, David, we were talking earlier. It's a bit like players and form. Atkinson in the early weeks of the season got rather too many mentions on this show. Yeah. Now the mentions are all positive.
Well, that's it, and that's the stride forward that we're asking the referees to take, isn't it? You know, early on in the season, I think Mark was the same. You know, there was a few mentions, a few little dodgy decisions, if you like.
I think, in fairness, he just wasn't getting the appointments.
Well, yeah,
and that's been
also,
proved entirely wrong.
Which that came from a proof of if performance is not, that's where he's dropping in the getting the games. You know, so I think it's great that the fact that throughout the season they've got stronger and stronger, the pair of them, along with a lot of other referees who've got better through the season. But now they've been rewarded with massive games. And like I say, Atkins last week, an absolute superb game, I thought.
The analogy would be a player can go a dozen matches without scoring, as you well know.
Exactly,
a burst
well, not a dozen,
of,
I mean. But yeah, I mean, it is. And all of a sudden, things click into place and you find yourself in the right positions on the park at the right times, and you can give the correct decisions then.
What about the significance, Keith, wider, that Martin Atkinson, we've long suspected, or you have suspected on this show, has been championed by the FA for Euro 16. And he's been pushed as our potential representative there. You've thought that Clattenburg was the obvious choice. Does this now give him an opportunity to come through on the rails for that?
I think the important thing is if we've got two names in the frame, that helps the process. And it actually creates the competition amongst each of those two referees, which I think is a good thing. And that's happened in the past. I just feel that Mark is the better referee and the guy who should be going forward. And yes, I think there's this question early on that Martin wasn't performing well, but he was still getting the big appointments. Yeah. And that was a surprise to all of us at that stage.
But it's healthy, as you say. Martin was in charge of Burnley's 1-0 win at Hull at the weekend. Burnley relegated Hull, real peril now. Talking point over the goal, the winning goal, which was scored while Michael Dawson of Hull was off the field changing a bloodied shirt. He got a bloody nose. That wouldn't have happened in your day, David, would it? He just mops it up.
I mean, the fact is, you used to just get wiped up by the physio and carry on with the game. Obviously now, head injuries, most injuries now, you've got to leave the field of play. How long he spends on that touch line is the referee's discretion. I mean, we've seen him wave straight back on. We've seen him waiting until certain situations clear up, and then they wave back on. So I think there's a little unsure part of the game there. But yeah, it's not very nice for for him to be off the park, and then obviously the goal.
For his team, Steve Bruce was unhappy about that, although he was unhappy about his precise performance, to be fair. That's what he blamed. But what do you make of it, that law, Keith?
Well, I think the law was brought out in relation to, at that time, you know, things like AIDS and various other scenarios. So it's all around the safety for players. My view is that an experienced referee, because I don't think the blood was gushing, would have waited for the corner to have taken place, and then said, look, you need to go off and change your shirt or get the blood situation.
Or even if he before the corner, they deal with the situation and then the game carries on. He's not out of the game then. You know, I think, okay, if he has to change his shirt.
But I don't suppose you could delay a corner for as long as it takes to go off and change your shirt.
No, I mean, effectively, let's be clear, if the player receives treatment and/or blood is seen, the law is clear, he has to go off immediately. What I'm suggesting here is that we have loads of laws where common sense applies, and a bit of common sense might have helped in this particular situation.
Okay. Some great performances. We will come to Andre Marriner at Chelsea, Liverpool, because there were issues in that game. Michael Oliver, Crystal Palace 1, Manchester United 2. I think a brave penalty award in that game.
I mean, my comment would be, well, he was in a good viewing position, right? And again, the law is specific. The arm and hand is right to the joint in the shirt. The player did chase it. It looked pretty obvious, although it was a difficult one to sell, because I think it took everybody by surprise. You know, the expression on players' faces is nobody really appealed. So my advice always to referees is don't create a surprise. He might have waited a little bit and got away with it.
But nevertheless, overall, I think he emerged fairly strongly, didn't he?
Well, I thought that after that decision, when the crowd got onto his bike, I thought there were one or two nervous sort of areas in his body language that he's got to overcome. But, you know, he's a young lad.
Still a lot to learn.
There was a very similar situation as well, the other way around, weren't they? Where the lad actually said, no, it hit me there. Well, it was the same scenario. And it wasn't a penalty then. And also, the Fellaini goal. I mean, there was a push into the keeper, which could have actually brought it to cancel out the goal.
Correct.
I always think goalkeepers get overprotected.
To be fair, I totally agree with you. As a centre forward, I totally agree with you. But certainly, there was a push, and the keeper does get clattered by his own defender.
Right. QPR relegated. Commiserations, by the way, to relegated teams, QPR and Burnley. Sean Dyche, in particular, somebody I know, a terrific guy, and I'm sure Burnley will stick with him and got every chance of coming back. Manchester City's 6-0 win. Mike Dean was in charge. Can only quote Refcam's Andy Martin. Masterful, effortless control.
He's been consistent, hasn't he, throughout the season? I mean, he with Clattenburg, as we have mentioned on numerous occasions. He looks confident. He's relaxed, and you know, he judged his intervention in that game spot on.
Andre Marriner we come to with the 1-1 draw between Chelsea and Liverpool. Now, Cesc Fabregas in the first 30 seconds, inside 30 seconds, only a yellow card for a really nasty looking challenge on Raheem Sterling. Should that have been red, Keith?
I don't think that Andre was outside the dressing room. I think his brain was still inside it. And I think it just highlights to any referee that, you know, you've got to be absolutely on the button from word go, same as a player. I just wondered whether, in fact, he had the ideal angle to see it. I think in slow motion, it's an easy one. It's red. Probably at the speed that Andre's seen it, it's yellow. But there's confusion around his action.
Is there a psychological problem for a referee to give a red card so early in a game?
A game like that, yeah. I mean, the clash that it is, you know, Liverpool, Chelsea. But yeah, it takes a brave man, I would have said. But
and should we have some understanding on the basis that, say, you'd have had a chance at some stage or other inside 30 seconds of the start, and you'd have snatched it and missed it because the game's only just started?
It does, and like Keith says, you know, referees have got to be on it from word go. As soon as he blows that whistle, that game has started, and he's got to be there just as much as the players have.
Right. I wouldn't relate you to any sort of incident of having being caught with your trousers down, but there was a shorts pulling incident in that game as well, also involving Fabregas.
No, you're right. I haven't been involved in anything like that.
Okay, so you're
That's
not going to
the
answer
safest
the
answer I'm giving on that one.
What about you, Keith? Have you,
It's interesting over recent weeks how Fabregas seems to be coming into the eye of doing some stupid things on the field of play. And I think he's just got to watch himself, because it's like everything. If he becomes a target and a marked man, I know we're coming to the end of the season. We'll remember that, and referees will react to it.
The suggestion was that if it had been punished at all, it ought to have been on the word of Gary Bestwick, one of the assistant referees, who could have seen it, but the referee wasn't best placed. Andre Mariner overall, Keith.
Well, I think that that's the possibility. The communication comes in, and the referee judges, no, I'll let that one pass. I've got bigger things to deal with.
Well, there's another one involving assistant referees later. Just briefly, Roger Easter, two of our more senior referees, shall we say. Roger Easter, Leicester's 2-0 win over Southampton. Chris Foy coming back after a number of weeks absent. Newcastle 2, West Brom 1, largely without incident.
Yeah, I think, whilst I've had my negative comments about Chris around his age and movement profile, he got through that one. And in the end of the day, the experience counts. And that he got through the game well.
By the way, for our American viewers, via goalnation.com, we'll be talking about MLS towards the end of the programme. Everton 0, Sunderland 2. Vital win for Sunderland. Shock result, really. Lee Probert. Glenn Turner's comment on RefCam, the crowd at Everton that you'll have refereed in front of, Keith. Goodison said, Glenn, it's possibly the worst place to miss a big call. They, meaning the fans, should really be asking how their highly paid stars had all the possession but couldn't score. That was some sympathetic comment from Glenn on RefCam about what was a pretty blatant missed penalty for Everton, did you think?
Yeah, I mean, you cannot afford in these games at Premier League level to make such an error. And it's avoiding those errors and missing those sort of big decisions, and then glossing over them.
This was Defoe bringing down Coleman.
Yeah.
Clearly in the area.
Absolutely.
In respect to the referee, Lee Probert, Glenn on RefCam pointed out that he couldn't possibly really have made that call because he was at the far side. He was nearer to the other touchline. You might say his positioning was out. I don't know.
But this is how it works, isn't it? Is his positioning in the right place, or we're looking at it from a slow motion and a replay? The guys are going to always have tough calls in games.
Well, Lee's on the left-hand side, touchline, and the incident happens beyond the far post, on the right-hand side. But the RefCam point was that Andy Garrett, the assistant, should have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Andy is a very experienced assistant referee who would normally come in and support. But, you don't know the interaction verbally between the assistant and the referee.
Is it good enough, that interaction?
Well, if it gets the call right. I mean, the fact that we don't know, and this is when I've always said that if referees had come out and answer these questions themselves, did Andy Garrett have a little word in his ear and he said, no, I don't think so, and carried on? He's actually done his job. He's done his job, whether it's right or wrong.
Video referee.
Yeah. Well, I think video referee, but the other side of it is assessor, because the Premier League don't operate with assessors. This would be an assessor going in post-match and saying, talk me through that incident, and then getting clarity. And if the guy said, look, I gave no interaction in terms of verbal assistance, then I'm going to downmark the assistant for not coming in and supporting the ref. The other question then is, look, you're the referee, why didn't you see it? Because that's what you paid for.
Moving on to Lee Mason, just finally. Aston Villa 1, West Ham 0. One very big topic raised by Sam Allardyce, not surprisingly. Valencia, was he fouled? Should that have been a penalty to Hammers? You don't look convinced.
No, I think that, again, this whole subject of handball has been fraught with inconsistency throughout the season. And I think sometimes referees are a bit confused. And therefore, give the call if you believe it. I mean, from my point of view, he was in a good position. He made the call. I'll support him on this.
You're supporting Lee Mason on that one, yeah. Okay, and 9 games, Keith, just 26 yellow cards. That's nudged just under that desired 3 per game.
Amazing. And do you know, I think one of the scenarios behind that is the referees are actually getting selected better for appointments. You know, there appears to be more thought. Is that Howard Webb? Is that Howard's influence coming in now to be able to make those selections, this referee for that particular game? This is what Kalina does. This is what Kalina does in putting Clattenburg out.
We've had less controversy to discuss. There's been an improvement. It's been noted. You know, it's not perfect, but we're not talking about 4 or 5 games all of a sudden. We're talking maybe about 1 or even...
It's just incidents, isn't it? It's not actually people having bad games. It's incidents in the game that's not been given correctly. You know, so it's shortening everything down.
Just finally, Major League Soccer. I know David's going to graduate to that eventually at the end of his career. He'll be going over the pond. RefCam covers Major League. If you haven't caught them, look at youaretheref.com. Fascinating insight into the way referees operate there. This was Toronto 1, Houston Dynamo 2, and as a finally, RefCam's assessment of the referee there, Chris Penso, was he was confident without being arrogant. His low-profile methods worked, and it was one of the best refereeing performances over there that RefCam had seen. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I think that both Peter Walton and Paul Roger, who obviously former Premier League officials, have gone across there, and they're doing a superb job. You know, and the referees, I spent some time with them in Pasadena. They're relaxed. There's a lot of interaction, and I think the interesting bit is that Peter is operating the management and the education in identical way to what we used to do in the PGMOL. They're assessed, they're looked at carefully, and they're given a lot of encouragement, which is great news.
It is indeed. David, Keith, thanks ever so much. Thank you for being there. Don't forget, any queries or questions for us, you can contact us at youaretheref.com. See you for another Ref Show next week. Bye.